Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming, and this is another Snap Judgment review. What is a Snap Judgment review? Well, game reviewers often overlook the first few hours of a game and also the ease of play of a game when they have to play the entire thing all the way through. So I only play a game for about 5 to 10 hours. I'm trying to give you an idea whether you're going to like this game right off the bat or not. That being said, coupled with the fact that I think gaming is one of the most subjective forms of art, I will not be giving a scored review. Instead, I will be telling you what the game is on a whole, then listing the pros and the cons of the game, in my point of view, as all reviews are. And then I'll be telling you whether I personally will be sticking with the game outside the purposes of this review or not. That being said, anybody who is a long-time listener of this channel will know what we are about to look at is Starfield. And it has been a long time in the making. I have had a lot of problems with Starfield's development, its ad campaign, and the company making it, as well as the company that owns the company making it. So that being said, now that this game is out in the open, did it live up to the hype? Did it do what we all wanted it to? Or did it fall flat? Well, first we got to get into what it is. Starfield, you play a created character who starts off a miner for the first few hours of the game. Before then, you get wrapped up and embroiled into a plot that takes you off the planet and into the investigation of artifacts. However, outside the first mission that has you joining the secret organization of alien artifact investigators, the Constellation, you can pretty much go anywhere in the universe and do anything you want. From space pirating to dogfighting to missions to undercover to all sorts of things. The game is huge. Truly huge. I'm not going to take anything away from that. It is a massive game. Tons of systems to explore. Tons of things to do. Tons of missions to get into, get involved with, tons of ships to grab and create. So I'm going to say right now, this review is one of the hardest I've had to do. Because 5 hours with this game does not seem like enough. But I have to stick to what I do. I have to stick to the formatting of this. So I'm going to do the best I can. I will say, interestingly enough, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. As you get to know things, there is two ways this game happens. One, it happens in your character, which you can either be in first person, third person, or an over-the-shoulder view. And then it also happens in the ship. There's a copious amount of shooting and melee combat. There's also a reworked persuasion game. And if you've played a Bethesda game before, all of this is going to look familiar, but just slightly revamped. That's something that I did kind of enjoy, is that every system from Bethesda is here and feels familiar, but is slightly more complicated, slightly more in-depth, slightly more well done in most ways. There's, of course, lock-picking systems, stealth systems, close combat, long-range combat, and all of the stuff in between. Plenty of companions to find. From what I understand, there are also companions to romance. However, I have definitely not gotten anywhere near that. As well as NPC companions to recruit to help you fill out your ship and do other stuff in there. There is also a whole lot of interesting space combat mechanics. You can actually change the power systems on your ship to make different systems to different things during a dogfight. And if you have a certain ability unlocked, you can actually take out the opponent ship's engines and board them, which turns into these insane gunfights in close combat NASA-style ships. NASA-style ships being the operative word. When Starfield said this is going to be NASA-punk, they were not kidding. It is very NASA-punk. It has an aesthetic that is rarely seen in games, and I very much enjoyed. It had this it married this kind of real-world space exploration feel of the equipment and clothing with a more fantasy sci-fi aspect, which just created something aesthetically that was very different to me that I did kind of find surprisingly fun. There are, of course, a number of factions in the game that you can actually work for. In my time I worked a very small amount for SysDef before, of course, joining the Pirates, because I wanted to be very aggressive in this game. I felt like, personally, I've been very aggressive towards the game, so I should play somebody who's very aggressive in the game, at least for my 5-hour stint. So I definitely made it my mission to join the Pirates, which we will talk about in the cons. We definitely will talk about. Other than that, like I said, tons of different dialogue options. There is a back and forth kind of weird persuade system that is revamped. The lockpicking is revamped. Then, of course, there's tons of crafting. There's also tons of ship creation tools here. I will say, which we will also get into, not a lot of it is explained very well. So you are going to be fumbling around in the dark with a lot of numbers and confusing menus for some time. A lot of the characters do kind of have that robotic Bethesda way of talking from Skyrim, but I didn't mind that. I know that's been a big complaint for people, but I kind of felt right at home since I am such a lover of Skyrim. Maybe I've just gotten too used to it. With the sheer volume of stuff you can do in this game, I don't feel I can continue to tell you about it. I've kind of gone through some of the stuff I've experienced, so I think the best way is to just move into the pros and cons and talk about that the best I can. I do want to say there is, as many Bethesda games have, an unprecedented level of freedom in this. I will say, as we get into, the freedom level is not quite as high as some of previous Bethesda's games, but still it is there. You can fly to any station. After the first opening tutorial thing, you can fly to any place you want to, touch down on any planet you want to. I will say there are some invisible walls on the planet side once you touch down, but I never really noticed them, so that's interesting. I think the bigger reviewers definitely noticed them, but if you're just kind of doing what you're doing, just having fun with it, you're very rarely going to run into these invisible walls. And then there's also Outpost Creation, which I never had time to get to. And then, yeah, that's it. So let's go ahead and just get into the pros and cons. There's just no other way to do this. There's nothing else. It's so big, it's impossible to talk about for just 5 minutes and have you understand what it is. It's basically Space Bethesda. So for pros, let's get right into it. The biggest pro that I have, without a doubt, I'm going to echo every other reviewer out there, and that is the ship building. I was very scared that I wouldn't get to it in my first 5 hours, just because the 5 hours are very long and a little bit tedious, which we'll get into. But I did manage to get to it, and I found it extremely awesome. Not only did I find it really fun and interesting to be able to very simply build and add anything that I wanted, but for the most part, with the slight lack of really telling you that when you delete a part you're selling it, it's very intuitive. It kind of goes very well together, and you can kind of put whatever you want on there and have a lot of fun with it. Which actually will segue into my next one, which is ship combat. And this was going to be a con. It was actually on my cons. But I decided not to leave it there because I have found ship combat to be very rewarding the more you do it. And I actually will disagree with some of the other reviewers who found it very arcadey. I actually found it very, very in-depth. I don't think they explain it very well in the beginning, and it led me to have a lot of space battles that I barely survived, which irritated me because I definitely wanted to do the space pirate thing, so I knew there was going to be a lot of space fighting. But as I started to work on my ship and started to get a little bit better at the piloting, I realized how in-depth and interesting it is. It all works off one analog stick, how fast you're going and how slow you're going. So you can make tight, really interesting turns just with flicks of the wrist. But if you don't know to do that, it's very hard to do it. Also, with customization on anything like this, I find anytime I build a really small, zippy ship that's fast, it never works because it's going to take a hit and it's going to die. I made a ship that is incredibly small and super fast, and it works really well, easily taking down 2 ships because nobody can hit me or get behind me. And I found that really, really rewarding. It's the first space game with customizable ships that I found I can do that I can basically punch above my weight class with speed. The ship building and combat I love, and to just segue right into the boarding. Unfortunately, there is a con to the boarding, which we're going to talk about in the cons, but the boarding is easily the most fun I've experienced in this game. The jumping in, basically, if you're in a space battle and you're on the last space guy and you have bought a trait, which again we're going to talk about in the cons, to be able to shoot out their engines before you destroy them, you can fly up to them real fast and board them, dock with them, jump on, and have these really tight enclosed shootouts through NASA-style ships. Cool. Second to none. It's so interesting and tactically different from any other shooter I've dealt with, just because of the tightness of the quarters, and like most of the time you see an exploding barrel, you can stay away with it. You can't do it on a tight little ship. So you have to really think about where you are, your spatial awareness, and where the other guys are. I found these just to be the most fun to do, so I was really rewarded by the space pirating. The other thing I really enjoyed was the attention to detail. They definitely talked to NASA on this, and there is just a really, really fine attention to detail on a lot of things. The landing, the ship, all that sort of thing. And yeah, I am actually running this on a 5600 XT, which is technically below the minimum requirement that Starfield requires. And it's still a pretty game, as you can see from the capture that I have. You just had to turn off one setting, which was something like FA2C2 or something like that. Make sure that's off, and the game looks great. Just a couple of little hitches here and there. So technically, I really enjoyed that part of it as well. I do want to say before we get into cons, I was talking to another friend of mine, and I just felt like I have all these cons, but I do keep coming back to this. I am still enjoying this game. So it's real tricky. It's a real tricky review to do. But let's get into the cons. My first and foremost con, the thing I personally hate most, and this might just be me having a pet peeve coming from other shooters, is there's no dedicated button to switch weapons. So what they have is this hotkey directional pad thing. So when you hit the directional pad, it kind of slows time down, and then you can switch through it, and you can have, I think it's something like 12 favorited items, each going up a directional thing that you have to switch back and forth through. I hate this. I want to be able to equip a certain number of guns and hit the button Y to flip to them on the fly. I don't want to have this weird slowdown time, fiddle through a menu, especially if I need to then go into my inventory to find a gun because it's not favorited, and my favorited guns are out of ammo. It's just super annoying. I'm constantly switching out my favorites. I'm constantly switching this out just to have the things with ammo. The inventory management is just not super great in this one, and I just wish that was a little bit better, a little bit more concise, and a little bit, well, better done. My next con is probably my biggest con, and this is going to be a little bit long-winded, but I have to compare this to Skyrim. This is a Bethesda game, and Skyrim is the bar for me when it comes to Bethesda, that nothing really surpasses. I think people can make an argument for Fallout 4, but personally for me, it's Skyrim or bust on Bethesda. That being said, this does not surpass it, especially in the freedom area. There's a lot of things that are forced in this game that just weren't forced, and a lot of ways to get into things that are over convoluted. Like they almost got too into the telling of the story, not thinking that telling the story in a certain way forces your character to be a thing or do a thing. My biggest example is I wanted to join the Crimson Fleet. That was the first thing I wanted to do. I wanted to be a space pirate with this character. Can you just fly to the place where the space pirates are and join them? No. I mean, you could in Skyrim. Skyrim, you could take off and run right to Riften, talk to the King of Thieves, and basically you were in the Thieves Guild after a small initiation mission. I would have preferred that. Instead, in this, you have to either be caught by the Vanguard, or you have to join the Vanguard via a side mission, then they put you into deep cover with the pirates, and then you can eventually side with the pirates. But you still have to keep doing these deep cover things and going back and reporting to the Vanguard. This just infuriated me. This isn't the way Skyrim worked. To make matters worse, I actually got really mad at this. So, and you're probably seeing this in the capture because I wanted to show some of the gunfighting. I decided to just shoot everybody on the Vanguard ship and fly off. In Skyrim, that's totally fine. You can kill a quest giver, and then that quest giver's quests are just automatically failed. You never get access to them. That makes sense to me. You can't do that in this. If you take down primary characters, they just go to their hands and knees and wait for you to leave the room. It's so frustrating. I shot everybody in this place, and then I ended up getting on my ship to make my escape, and the captain was just alive and blew me out of the sky before I could make the grav jump. And yeah, you could say, well, why did you shoot up an entire base? But at that point, I just wanted to be a pirate and join the pirates. I didn't want to work for SysDef. And even though it's a potentially ludicrous and stupid decision, Skyrim allowed you to make those ludicrous and stupid decisions and then deal with the consequences. This doesn't. Sure, the consequence is me being shot out of the space, but by the captain that I shot in the head 7 times, why is he still alive? He's never going to let me work for him anyway. I hated this part of this. It also adds into where you have to go join Constellation at first. I didn't want to join Constellation. In the original Skyrim, once you did the original tutorial, you could just run in a different direction. I played Skyrim for 50 hours before ever learning how to do a shout because I just avoided Whiterun. Not because I was trying to avoid the main story, just because that's not what I wanted to do. Bethesda is really good at making side factions seem like their entirety own game. But Starfield railroads you into playing the other game. So it takes you out of that. It takes you out of that character moment and forces you into these other moments that you don't really want to be a part of or do. And I don't like that. Is it still very free? Yes. It's probably one of the most free games out there on the market as far as like choices and stuff like that. But does it compare to Skyrim? I would actually say no as far as the freedom goes. And that really bugged me. All right. That rant over, we have a couple other things. There is a ton of loading screens in this. And again, I am running this on not a low-end computer, but a low-end computer compared to its specs. It is on an SSD, and I do have it on plenty of gigabytes. But again, my graphics card is a little bit chugging when it's playing. Still, there's a lot of loading screens. To move through an entire city, there's usually like 4 or 5 loading screens for each area. Which is a little bit much, in my opinion. There's also, and this one's a weird one, there's stupid little things in this game that should be intuitively shown to you or done. This game fails to teach you a lot of things. There's tons of systems in it, such as crafting, lockpicking, crafting of all sorts of different things like pharmaceuticals and ship creation and everything. But like little things are left out. Little things aren't explained to you. And there's no like way to turn on even help notifications. So you end up in the dark and it almost puts you off from doing these things or trying these things. One of my biggest examples is when you steal another new ship, you have to register it. If you don't register it, all the bodies on it just stay on it. You can still put stuff in the cargo hold and take it around, but you can't change it in any way. You can't change its name. You can't rebuild it or customize it. So you have to register it. When you go to register it, all it tells you if you don't have enough credits is you don't have enough credits. It doesn't actually tell you the amount of credits you need until you have enough credits, at which point it will say you need to spend this amount of credits to purchase. Why wouldn't you just put that number in the first place? It's so, like, stuff like that. There's these little intuitive things that you just think, this is common sense, this is common logic. Why isn't this in the game? I don't understand. Like, just put that there. Like, seriously. Alright. Whether or not I'm going to stick with it. Yeah, I think I am going to stick with it. Will it be as long-lasting in my library as Skyrim? I have no idea. I have been playing Skyrim on and off since it was created 10, 11 years ago at this point. And I'm always going to go back to Skyrim. I'm still going to go back to Skyrim at some point. Skyrim's just that free, open experience that I love. Will Starfield be that for me? I cannot tell you. I cannot answer that question at this point in time. I think it has potential to be that, but it doesn't have the freedom that I loved from Skyrim. But it does have enough freedom that I think I would go back to it.
At the bottom right.
I also do want to say, I didn't really say it in the pros, but they've really revitalized some of the shooting for Bethesda and the combat, and it actually feels pretty good. Feels pretty weighty, and I enjoyed that part of it. Bethesda's never really done combat super well, Bethesda proper anyway. And this one does it good, other than the weapon switching thing I talked about. I mean, really, it comes down to, like I said, I just listed so many cons while I was playing, but I couldn't wait to do the next thing. So it's a weird challenge here that I have a lot more defined cons for this game, but I want to play it again. I can't wait to play it again. I can't wait to take another piracy shot. So you're going to have to do what you want with that. And also keep in mind, I only had about 6 hours with this game. That was the best I could do before I could get this review out. I will say it definitely isn't as slow as some other people have said, but I am enjoying it.
Yeah, no shoot.
One final con I do want to note as a PS postscript before I do my sign-off is that in the game, there is a lot of really cool stuff. It is locked behind skill upgrades. This kind of goes to the they don't tell you anything con, and I just didn't explain it enough, but like the lock-on system to be able to shoot out the engines is actually a skill that you have to pick up with a skill unlock. You actually have to unlock piloting and level it up in order to get to take over certain ships. None of these jet boosting, you have to actually unlock that skill. And I just thought that was ridiculous in the game. Why would you lock the fun stuff behind that so early? Like, put the lock on and the jetpacking in for everybody, because that's fun. That's what you want people to be experiencing. They certainly don't tell you that it exists. So, like, one final con, I just want to let everybody know. So that's it. That's the end of the review. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? What did you guys think? Tell me in the comments below. You can also reach us on Facebook at OldManGamingDH, on Twitter at OldManGaming9. You can join our Discord, links in the description below, influences in all of our shows from there. As long as you keep watching, listening, I'll keep making them. See you guys next time.
Just been me yelling at Ben to stop being